Okay. We are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this presentation, to this evening, to this series of architecture talks here at Centre Culturel Suisse, which we transferred tonight to this online broadcast format. My name is Claire Hoffmann. I'm curator here at Centre Culturel Suisse and also curate the Design and Architecture series. So the idea of these architecture evenings are to invite architects or studios to present their practice, their philosophy, their vision of architecture and their projects, and be they realized or planned or dreamed projects. And obviously, apart from diving into a practice, the idea is also to especially open discussion and conversation with the audience. So we will maintain this interactive part, even though we are on this online platform. So as you see, we're using Twitch as an online live channel. And if you just want to watch and not interact, then you don't need to do anything. Just continue and see what's coming. If you would like to interact and especially ask questions following this presentation and ask questions in the Q&A, you just need to make a little login to the Twitch. And with this profile, this will allow you to write in the chat. The chat, you can find it. It's on the upper right side with this little arrow, which will open up, and there you will find the chat to write your questions and comments. And don't hesitate to also just start writing comments during the presentation. Now, let me introduce and welcome our guests, the 10 team, an architecture and research group, collective based in Zurich and Belgrade and Helsinki, made up of architects and researchers with a special focus on grounded research and implementation of new processes in the development of their projects. So 10 has already won a number of important awards. In 2018, they won the Swiss Art Award for Architecture. In 2020, the Foundation Award, and are nominated for the European Union Prize for Contemporary Architecture, the Mies van der Rohe Award in 22. So that's a really nice recognition for their work already. And now to maybe the content side, 10 has a rather elaborate and a very beautiful mission statement. And there are some notions that have attracted my attention and which I would like to highlight here. So one thing that struck me is the observation that 10 makes on how architecture and academia are trapped in specialization. And so if I understood well, at 10 with their practice addresses the challenge to bring architecture closer to the users and to the community. Another term that I found really beautiful to read is in this process of making architecture more understandable, 10 is engaged in modes of architectural literacy. So how can we understand and make sense of the built surrounding? And then there is also a particular stress on drawing as a practice and as a medium, and the link of drawing to these other media, be they plans or the constructions and the projects. And if I may say so, I think also their projects have a drawing-like attention. So a particular focus on the line in the landscape or in the construction. And then obviously one important aspect, which is the collective. So as you see, there are many people joining into this talk. It's a large team, and so the collective work, but also cooperative projects as community-based projects or public housing projects are part of what they're interested in and interact with, and also multiple collaborations. And finally, in their mission statement again, and I will close with this and give the word to tou.te.s, they also contradict Wittgenstein's notions that words are deeds. And so in a world of words, tou.te.s is in favor of action. And obviously they also have acted very concretely into the built environment, and will also speak, I guess, about one of the completed projects, which is Pavlova House in Belgrade, where they have developed a building in close exchange with the client, with the constructor, and that are locally based. And this is a project that also has gathered really a lot of echo, attention, and a nice press echo as well. So I would like to welcome the team of 10 who today joins in from Zurich with Scott Lloyd, Lukas Burkhardt, and Nicolas Rothenbühler. From Belgrade, we're joined by Nemanja Zimonic, Jana Kulic, and Onion Krasna. And from Helsinki, there is Luka Piskorec. So thank you very much to 10 that you agreed to this format and that you present your practice. And I'm very excited and looking forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for the introduction. I'm just going to share the screen now. Just tell me if you see it. Good? Yes, and thank you also for preempting the warning about the variety of work, because we've come together to present for the first time, I think, when we're collecting a lot of the different works we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. And this is a good test to see where and how they actually fit together in our kind of design principles that we state quite openly in our statute and also on the website and through other medium. And there's plenty of time at the end to ask questions if this doesn't make sense. So I think it'd be good to get feedback on that and stick with us for 40 minutes and we'll be able to elaborate more. Yes, here we go. So this work, what you're seeing here, is a collaboration led by Luca. It's dealing with the idea of how we understand our practice as architects, and it's generally looking at the method of design, or at least how we look at design. And it's a collaboration which we're doing with a artificial intelligence bot. This bot is drawing on about 50,000 archived images of architecture. And we took the exercise as a type of training to understand how these types of intelligences work. And just very bluntly, it's an idea here where the machine is trying to create a morph between archetypes, which we have selected, and part of the scripting which we're working on and the parameters which we're changing. We're drawing on this large database of images to kind of search out what comes up in between these kind of limits of these two archetypes. You can see here a series of morphs here which we set out. And what is telling us here is that this stuff is generated from that data quite fluidly. I mean, it's not an effort for the machine to do this, but it then leaves us that idea of trying to understand the value in any of this work which is being presented to us. And I think as an angle on a design process, it kind of gives us a little bit of an insight into perhaps some new domains of where other intelligences can come up with ideas, and we're the ones who have to be the ones linking it back to kind of like cultural value, that discernment which we're built up and which we've learned about. We've never learned to work with these machines in our education, so we think it's a good time we know it's coming. We know this this technology is in an emerging phase right now, and the idea of this exercise, it's a light one, something which we do to kind of train a little bit this, or to be maybe to anticipate some of these logics which are foreign to us, but incredibly fascinating. The images are surprising, sometimes ugly, sometimes beautiful, and it gives us also a reflection on how we're doing when we're also designing. And then this leads us then to, and then drawing on that kind of work, we then look at the database which we've been collecting over the last 5 years or so on this literacy of the architectural floor plan, and we feed these database, much smaller database, to the machine to try and figure out more of an architectural way to see what kind of knowledge we can generate. But on that, I think we're very much interested in seeing how our approach to architecture can be supported by various different tools. And on the right, you see an application of a similar procedure, but this is using open data sets from the city of Zurich and from Street Map and the kind of data which we come across. And again, we are pointing the machine, in this case, it's also some scripting, to these open data sets to try and solve a particular problem which we see as kind of fundamental to architecture, and that is that of housing, in particular affordable housing. And we think that if we can do this type of research with the support of these technologies, we may get a little bit closer to kind of cracking some of the key generational questions which are present right now. For those of you who are not in Switzerland, we may not be aware that there is actually an affordable housing crisis also in Switzerland, and in Zurich. It's you can see on the left there is it's one of the most expensive places to rent, and 80% of the residents in Zurich actually rent their own homes. And this has been an issue which has been increasingly come to the public fore. With the financialization of housing, the overblown housing markets has increased rental prices. And it puts us in a position where the public have voted in 2011 on a legislation to ensure that the city of Zurich can have at least 1/3 of the housing stock in Zurich out of the market, so non-market housing. At the moment, it's about 27%. And you can see here on the left, there's a diagram showing all of the housing units in Zurich, which are either under cooperative housing or under City of Zurich housing. It's about 20% generally in Europe, but this is 27% in Zurich. It's not bad. But you can see on the right, there's a growing number of units which are satisfying a growing population. And that referendum will never be met, this 33% target. We also note from our research that there is an incredible amount of capital investment coming into real estate. The house is no longer a house for use. It's actually a house as a product. It's a financial product. And that's really distorting how people can have access to affordable, livable units in the city center, well-accessed housing. It's also quite a paradox that also in Switzerland, you have 80,000 apartments which are actually empty because they've been used as an investment vehicle, built, but then left, and they're basically on the books of those who are investing in them. So this type of issues are something which we think is fundamental to our work. And so what we've been doing is working on scripts which take the open data and they crawl through the data we have on the city to try and locate areas within the city which are actually easily built in a kind of a very small studio-like fragments of architecture. The point for this is that there is a huge demand for the studio apartment, for the changing demographics, are kind of pointing more that architecture fulfills this type of market demand and less of the 3.5 bedroom apartment, which are being churned out every month in Switzerland. So what we're doing there is looking at the city. We understand that the city has no more sites left for large-scale cooperative or non-market housing. And what we're proposing is, if we can find all of these sites, we can propose a small studio style cooperative housing. And what's interesting about Zurich and about the cooperative scene here is that there's been incredible innovation in architecture and cooperative living. It's not just about the housing. As you can see here on the diagram on the left, that's Kaltbreite. It's one of the leading cooperative housing developments in Zurich. It's housing, but also the shared services which comes to that. So for example, we're proposing that because there's no more large scale sites in Zurich, we will use smaller sites and we will distribute a cooperative over a 5-minute walking distance. So for example, in the cooperative, if I have a health room, or I have a yoga room, or I have a co-working space, they're all distributed in one of these cooperative fragments, and that's called then the distribution of this, and we use the public space to connect all of those fragments together. We took this project on as a challenge on that level, also to present. We were invited to represent Zurich, to present this idea at the Biennale, the Seoul Architecture and Urbanism Biennale. And to do that, we wanted to show this idea of the shared spaces which connects all of these distributed cooperatives. And this one here, for example, is a showroom, a shared showroom where you could go and receive items and then try them. It's something of a communal center as well. And to do this, we didn't want to go to Seoul and present the compact living which we're developing in this project, but more so on these shared spatial assets. To do this, we put together an internal competition, which we all did in the team, and come up with some very tight, very beautiful small spaces, which could be then shared within that distributed cooperative. On the left here, you see this could be like a pad, like a very elaborate, beautiful bedroom, which you could then reserve for a weekend, but then actually you live in a smaller, compact housing unit as part of the distributed. And here we built, for all of these images, they were meant to be projected onto one-to-one in a room size. We built very large 1-to-20 models that became very, very detailed. We made every book there and cut every shelf in order that they could become just this impressive kind of iconic language to try and communicate what a small space could be using a very, very large model technique. You can see here, this would be a health retreat spa on the top of one of these fragments, which you could also reserve as part of your membership inside that distributed scheme. And in Seoul, then, when we presented this work, we chose the smallest museum space they had in the museum village. And this was a way of signifying how, if you're living in a small fragment, a small cooperative space, you open up to all other shared assets which are available within the area where you're living. And going back to the script again, we have now, which is the next phase of the project, identifying some of the most promising of these fragmented spaces, which the script has found. And we now have the chance, we're looking at one site in particular for a live one-to-one prototype of one of these distributed units. But we actually can select between 3,500 to 4,000 of these sites, which have automatically been found by the script. And we can always start adjusting them to get that project to a physical phase. So I think in a way, and as a transition, we like to understand the materials or the resources, these spaces which are left over in the city. They're not profitable for for-profit investors, but they're there and they're a resource. And that as a design philosophy, to kind of extract on materials or spaces or details which come from nothing, they come from a creative process. We can create kind of value through that design effort.
So this is the next project, and meanwhile the one Scott just talked about project has probably a multiple authorship where you can see different persons within the images. This one is maybe a bit different, and it has probably to do with this black matter, which became the subject of this journey. So this was an open call for Swiss Art Award. We responded as a collective, and basically had very few limits and started a research. To the left, you see our collected emails, and to the right, you see this black material we stumbled on by a visit in Kunstgießerei St. Gallen, where you're going to see a lot of images also from. And we started this process, which consisted of theoretical research that quickly gravitated around study. And at the same time, we were allowed at the Kunstgießerei St. Gallen to experiment with this material. So this sand is used for making molds for metal casts. It's reusable at the rate of 97%. That means you get this mold and then you break it apart, and it goes through a process and it can be reused and re-glued together. At the same time, we started to look at the studiola of the Duke Montrefeltro in Tugale, which was done in the early Renaissance. And now here, having a bit of similarities, actually did not necessarily have at this stage. It's a bit retrospective, but this sand began to take form, and also we discovered this place, which is the place for the Duke to kind of quite a modern conception of use, and it was covered with different shaded wood parts, which were images, became images, and it's an incredible craft skill involved. Meanwhile, we were rather on the low-tech end, just getting further with shapes and surfaces. And eventually we got to a place where we have a bit more of a spatial phenomenon. And also we were quite advanced in time. So we realized that with this double practice, we started a process that was to some degree hard to stop. It was already going, and it was kind of always suggesting its next phase. So we started to cast big pieces that relate to the room of the Duke of Montefeltro, and each piece kind of reacted to the former one, and this, you can see maybe symbolically, Carl here suffers a bit of a moment of nervosity, which I think is a special thing if you're speaking about the collective, because I think we hold each other to high standards, and that makes that has a dynamic also that if your project is not running well, you also collectively suffer, and you keep listening to each other, and you kind of have to trust that the idea will come to you. It's kind of an experience we had. We went further to the next pieces that were kind of cornerstones of this room, and also were an evolution of our knowledge about this material. And started also to get responses by the public, which were very encouraging. But we also, time was we're getting closer to our deadline, so this was also very helpful. And then we decided to take this process to the site, which is from the left to the right side here. This is on the right side, you see the Swiss Art Award installation planned for the hall in the Messehalle in Basel. And this is where the process arrived. And I think we became conscious of it being it, and it having to be transported from St. Gallen to Basel, which was also something to be nervous about. But it all went well, and very quickly it was there, and we all perceived it in the space. And of course, not just we perceived it, but also standing there on these openings, people asked me, and I'm sure everybody actually, well, what's the topic? What does it mean? And I listened to my colleagues explaining it, and I realized that I was explaining it quite differently. And this is something which is, I think, very nice, and you have to kind of value that each of us can speak differently about this piece, and have our own story about it. And so this one is one of mine. I believe what we created, or I could read it as two kinds of spaces. Space meaning as something that evolves out of relation of parts, meaning that we have a virtual space, which is the relation of images, ideas, a discourse that we share among us, that we grew over the years, and at the same time creating a physical space that has kind of a loose center within, but has no fixed boundaries and kind of radiates to its limits. And I think for me, this was, it's a bit of an abstract reading, but it has also to do how I think, approach architecture is an understanding of space as a product of relations, and within relations there is meaning and there is content. And then this material, this sand, had to be reused. It was only borrowed to us, and it had an amount of value. So it took its next cycle and became destructed. So almost like a force of nature, this is exposed to transformation. And in that case, sadly enough, was gone, but of course we also were aware of it and we liked it. Yes, please.
Which would bring us to the next project. And we often, I think it's really part of our practice that we start anew and rethink things we have done, rethink what we see. So I would like to introduce the next project through another small one. These photos are from the Grimsel area in the Bernese Oberland. They're from a field trip we took with the Brazilian artist Mabe Betonico. She's based in Geneva. And she had a very simple task for us, which was to go there and choose an object and basically, yeah, look at it for 1 hour. And I think it's these simple questions that come out of these restarts that arise, that also fascinates us. And this one would be, yeah, where do things come from? And in a material, or in a question of matter, this area is quite fascinating. It's an area that time is represented by geology. Earth has quite a young surface compared to other rocky things in our solar system. So it's constantly reshaped by climate, by geological activity, and of course by life forms. And the Homo sapiens has been quite dominant lately in transforming it, not only in terms of material flows, but also in terms of the climate. And this question, what actually shapes our surroundings, I think it's a very basic one that was also informing the next project from the start. This project was commissioned or was brought to us after the earthquake in 2015 in Nepal, which was very devastating with a lot of casualties, and we were happy to accept it. It was an interesting and it was quite a big challenge, as the village Tame was not accessed by any sort of roads where you could transport things, and that at the same time it's also part of a World Heritage Site where not only the village but also the whole forest and the surroundings are protected. So everything that is brought to the village has to come there kind of by footpath. Here you see David, who was on site for a month or so, and well, what they had was a super fast internet connection, but that was basically it. And these restraints were also sort of the interesting thing, that all the materials you will see now that we could use had to be used in a very simple term. So we tried to make plans, as we also had local construction managers that were quite direct and easy to kind of build. with the local building techniques, and that the material was used in the most possible and most efficient way. And of course, the brief had the main objective to create buildings that would offer a better security against earthquakes. And one of the bigger problems is actually called the wall delamination, which means collapsing parts of the walls could hit people and hurt them. So we kind of developed a textile structure with thread, metal thread, that was weaved around the building, connecting wooden parts with the mass of the stone, and also kind of giving a response to other kind of impact problems of earthquakes. This metal thread was applied after it was built, and it was something that left us also with rather a big fascination, because it would disappear completely and become invisible, still being the most significant change in the local building technique. And in that sense, the project has its secret, and in a way there's not much left to see when you actually get there of the main impact or the main design decisions. And here you see also another drawing here. On the left you have this structure of the thread. On the right it's an interior of another building up there. And I think it's the main fascination of this project is definitely the invisible, which is also part of our interests.
So structural knowledge and using our knowledge as engineers is embedded in most of our architecture designs. And in contrast to the invisible structure of the monks' dormitory, here lies another project that we did is very direct and very visual with using structure in a completely different, again, mountain landscape. Design of the in this project is used both, like we used it to play with stability, to play with the program and questioning the program of one house and in the boundaries of living between the house and the nature. And this is a project of house, Pavlova House. It is a residence situated in a landscape of the Pavlova mountain near Belgrade in Serbia. And this is the project that was, this is the one that was nominated for the Miss Mandela Award. Every element of the house emphasizes the performance of structure and space, and provides either weight or lightness at a specific point, or either expanse or contraction at other points. And example of these are visible joints of the main steel frame and the connections to the bearing points, and exposed bracing and raw material finish. And most elements of the house are designed as structure elements, and this allowed us to play with the spans and with cantilevers of the structure. All details are revealed, and this is a kind of directness in the making that makes house understandable to all and accessible to all. It is organized in a 3.2 meter grid frame, and the outside measures are 16 by 16 meters, and the inside courtyard is 9.6 meters. And the whole frame is made out of 80 millimeter square steel tubes that are mostly welded in place. And this steel structure is actually fixed to the ground through a minimum of three landing points, and these are the three concrete elements. One is hidden in the ground, and two of them are actually concrete elements in the garden. You can go to the previous slide again. These elements in the garden are either the staircase from the garden to the house, or actually a storage and the bathroom for the garden. And this open frame that you can see the image and the plan, and this open frame in designing the structure gave us opportunity to play with the program of the house, and the surrounding surface forms both the inhabited area of the house and erases the limits of the building pyramid. And the house is, as you can see, a single-story space built over the existing inclined garden. The main floor is actually a new level within the topography of the existing slope, and it overlooks the surrounding forest. And this open structure embraces the immediate landscape and sets a new geometry and strong architectural outline. It is actually designed as a sequence of 4 terraces, and a house can expand from the interior space, which is like 50 square meters, to the exterior space with terraces, which is 150 square meters. Also within the interior, when you use the space, either you use a bathroom or a kitchen, you fill the entire the program that you use fills the entire volume of the house, because there are no partitions inside. And elements of the house, like these big doors that you see here on the screen, or shade or sun shades, they also they have this performance factor, and also this performance allows the user to play with the private and open and interior and exterior. You can see it also here. Go to the next one. So the house is a case study on how design effort can turn sufficiency into a desirable form of living, how to actually use simple means and low budgets to build a dream house. And this here is our client Zoki and his house. Zoki is a local craftsman, and he works on interior refurbishments and domestic maintenance, and we designed, developed, and built this house with him. This on the right is a reference from Adamedica. Adamedica is an island, is a river island in Belgrade, and this is actually a summer place where this culture of self-builders that exists in the Balkans is really shown. People build these houses themselves, and in the same way, this is the same way that we did our house. It's making our house in the form of ideal contemporary home, using everyday materials, and it's made by the skills of local makers. and we actually created a result of regional significance, which is regionally very accepted. And means to the production, we can go to the next slide, which also shows examples of self-building. And the means of the production of the house were modest, and the skill was local. The central premise of the project was to include the future owner, the Zocchi, in the process of making by specifying only available local material and construction knowledge. And this is where we use actually his knowledge because he's a builder. And the conversation with Zocchi identified material resources, workshop skill, and capacities within the range of the region around the house. And you saw on the previous image the metal workshop close to the site that developed the steel structure, developed the doors and sunshades. So this go to the next one. This kind of process challenged the normal one, where architecture being a complete conceptual product delivered to the site to be built, but instead opened the process of conversation and process of construction and for the future use, for the future practical use and maintenance of the house, and for the way we were going to build it. And go to the next one. It also brought, this is an example of like how drawing translates into living. Go to the next one. And this also brought, this conversation brought solutions to the casting on the site of the exposed concrete and using for example, the recycled metal sheets for the round corners, and using the wooden panels for the walls. We designed the formwork ourselves because there were no big companies that were involved in projects that could do this for us, but we actually needed to learn how to do it and to actually to find out how to use self-compacted concrete and how to make the formwork strong enough to hold the concrete. Here you can see how we actually also learn from the site, and how we are inspired by the site, and how we translate things we see during the construction into things into interior in this image. And actually the accuracy of the formwork with working with Zocchi and working with his workers gave us opportunity to experiment with the way things were built, and the accuracy of the formwork is it's really the concrete is really smooth, but it's because the guy who was really good with painting interiors, he is the one who filled in the gaps in the formwork while we were doing it. And this experimentation in the procedure of construction offered, as I explained, new applications for local construction skills. All the details left exposed. You can go to the next one. They reveal the proof of labor and skill by the people driving the construction, and the formal expression of the project demonstrates the, well, actually, the formal impression demonstrates the human factor in production of the house. And this is actually, you see the images from the construction site, balancing the structure. And there is a lot of stories and people involved in the building of the project. And for example, one of the stories from the neighborhood is when people passing by, that a bridge is being made in the neighborhood.
Yes, I believe this storytelling was a really big part of what this house means and what, like, all throughout its life. And I think it, in a way, reflects the sort of wonder of how the house was made and with what skill and what knowledge and craft. But also, as the end result emerged, we kind of got this sort of a mystery of who this house was actually made for. And even though it was all the way the local craftsmen that knew each other that made this house, people still talked about this being a house for a football player or a famous person. And what struck me the most in these conversations with people as they visited the house was that they kind of didn't have the sense that this house is attainable for ordinary people. And the moment they realized that this is actually more affordable than ordinary apartment in Belgrade, you can see this sort of a click when they start imagining this sort of new possibility for their own lives, I guess. Next slide. And then this sort of re-questioning also can be brought to larger scales. Of course, this is a completely different context. This was a housing project we were invited for in Bern, called Holliger. Here, going from Avala, where not much was determined, here you kind of get this sort of predetermined recipe for what this sort of mix of life in a high-rise should be, which also becomes, in a way, a constraint. Next slide. And then actually it was the knowledge of the structure and engineering that kind of unlocked those constraints and opened up possibilities for additional programs and additional imagining of how this high-rise should work. So it created this sort of communal spaces as a spine that connects the predetermined program, but also the way it was built enabled, so it was the raw structure that contains like 3 floors each, and then in between the floors you get the wooden structure, which then in terms of building means that this high-rise could be easily changed, which is also ecologically, from an ecological standpoint, more efficient in long term. And also in this type of building, the interior itself reflects how it is built. So in each level, you kind of get the sense where you are in the building. And then the out of 3 floors, the one on the top is actually more flexible because you don't actually need any construction there because of the steel or concrete columns that carry it, and that opens possibilities for different.
Next. So what do we know about high rises and skyscrapers? I mean, once you design one, or once you start designing one, you kind of have to look into the history of them, and there's no direct answers to be found. But what's really exciting is to find values that you can just translate. And I guess not to make a conclusion out of our talk, but to draw a few values that we really go back to when we speak about design and for whom, and sort of a societal issues. On the left, it's the tower as it's being built, and on the right, it's an engraving, a drawing from the 10 books of architecture. Now, famously, the 10 books of architecture never had drawings inside. It only had text, and that translation led to this. But I would like someone to convince me that we're not seeing a really modern tower on the right side. So this timeless value really is something we try to capture. Next. We're not really academics and we're not historians, but we also worked very closely with the historian, Emma, who one project was completely dedicated to annotation between us. Also led us to understand how we can read from history. And what we're really interested in the design process is a sort of the main idea, the main outline, because once we set that outline right, it doesn't matter if it's the Renaissance workers, like with the Alberti, or if it's Zocchi filling it out. Of course, we're in the middle of it. We're not standing away. We are actually throwing ourselves right to the kind of microscopic. Next. And there, when I say draw, or when we say draw as well, it is a fine line between what how something is drawn, whether it's drawn as on the right side to what you see, a trace of a shadow, or as on the left, whether you are actually designing and guiding that shadow, so actually it translates into a more careful design. Next. But the design, of course, is not just created, it's also inherited. And also the design is always, it's sort of only reimagined. It's never, it's only evolving. Because on the left, you see these analogies that we're really interested in. On the left, you see Robert Smithson with the kind of famous image that I guess is so copied, you know. And we all know it, but on the right, he was a student of history. And he understood actually it comes with basic principles and basic values. It's a kind of photo of the Native Americans on the lake, where actually what he only did is to kind of reinterpret that history again. Next. And we seek for that as well, to understand better what's coming. I mean, on the left side, it's also a very special place to one of us. And that we found many places. On the right, you see this is a Le Petit Maison by Corbusier, close to Geneva. And on the right side, you see a kind of no-name Macedonian village that we saw once we actually started the whole 10 ship. A few years ago, we did a project in Skopje that we didn't show, that also was grounded in the local geography. And we started recognizing these kind of timeless design elements. Next. We look into heroes, but unlike, you know, the image on the left, that was 2008, I believe, when Sarkozy gathered in Paris, all these kind of world star architects to save the world, to save Paris, to kind of, you know, lead the way. We don't really believe that is possible anymore. And we kind of want to also practice that message. We believe way more in the kind of intimate and in the anonymous heroes, like in the kind of still that you see on the right side in the movie by Jim Jarmusch, Only Lovers Left Alive, where actually it's the people that we encounter, that we work with collectively, but individually also, that are becoming our heroes, much like Zocchi. Next. Of course, we are interested in the big picture. On the left side, 1972, the Blue Marble, probably the most reproduced image in history, you know, of the internet as well. It's the first kind of understanding, or the first image photograph of the planet Earth. And on the right side, you see the whole Earth catalog. It's a counterculture American magazine, which was being published before that, so 1968 to 71, which was really dealing with the kind of beginning of the internet. It was the internet before internet. It contained information, but you couldn't buy things. But also it was about self-awareness. It was about self-sufficiency. It was about ecology. It was about knowledge that is being shared and actually literacy. And once we design, you all know the powers of 10 by Eames. Once we design, we are really trying hard to set the questions in each project so we can enter multiple scales and find these analogies between projects, but also within the projects that provide these kind of multiple stories and histories, which we're interested in, both individually and also, you could say, collectively. Our expertise, our individual expertise allow us to do that. Next. Much like in Avala, you're looking at Rorschach, we love the translations. We love the translations from drawings to formworks to buildings. And that's something that we will continue to work with, because that basically captures the imagination even before something is finished. Next. And I'm coming to a closure. The directness of an idea, the directness of that outline for us serves only about as much to kind of throw ourselves, but also engage, and I could use that word now, infect others on site to really show and share and capture that passion, so that actually what we do and what we practice gets to be executed in the same way. Next. And kind of the last slide I would like to share quickly is a simple project we did, or we're still doing, that Scott mentioned in the beginning. It's a kind of archive of floor plans. We were once asked to draw the rooms of 10 or our atelier spaces, and instead we didn't want to draw that. Instead we suggested something else. We suggested an open question, a research on how can we design with artificial intelligence. Down at on the right image, down at the left corner, you see actually our 2 spaces in Zurich and Belgrade. And on the right up corner, you see actually something we would love to have as a studio space. So we started working with the machine in order to create this scale and this variety of spaces. This black matter, as Nico mentioned, actually for us forms into all types of possible stories and floor plans, in our opinion, all buildable, because actually that's really what we believe, that our work, especially architectural work, is its most powerful once it's in a kind of form of a buildable idea. Next. And so to kind of quickly annotate one of the people we follow, or couldn't call heroes, Michael Heiser. We're living in a world that is technological and primordial simultaneously, and I guess the idea is to make architecture that reflects this premise. And with the next slide, we're kind of sharing that open question amongst us, and that's also something that we cherish a lot. Every time we step into a project and we finish a project, it's actually never finished. It's maintained between us in the dialogue. And so we hopefully shared the kind of variety of things with you that we do, that we are interested in, but we also share that with us. And it's like an open dialogue every time we meet and a new encounter. So thank you very much for being there with us, and we look forward to a conversation.
Thank you, Ten. Thank you to all of you who presented, and that was a really very rich and broad presentation. I am inviting the listeners, the followers, to write their questions in the chat if you want to interact directly with the team here. They will see your questions, your comments, and then we can enter into a discussion. If you want to write in the chat, just as a reminder, you need to do a quick login on Twitch. That will take you just a few minutes. So we can wait if some of you have not done this yet. But maybe I can start with maybe one comment, or rather, maybe on this these questions of the collective. I was wondering, like, you're so many people and in so many different places, and you're doing this amazing variety of things. And I was just wondering, how do you process this? What is your methodology, or what is your rhythm to somehow tune in and find, be able to make decisions, like work also efficiently on these like large projects? How does this, I mean, I'm sorry if this is a very naive question to ask to architects, because I guess you're all used to these processes, but it seems like you're in a particularly challenging infrastructural, geographical situation. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit of this experience. I mean, and how it obviously how it reflects on the projects and how it makes you grow. I mean, that's like the basis of what you're doing, I guess.
I would maybe just like to super quickly comment here and point out, I think it's evident, the irony is evident that the situation that we have and the way we work now already for, I guess, 6 years, in a way, the whole world is now working in a similar way by necessity. So this was kind of the mode that we had sort of pre-pandemic as well. Which in a way got maybe worse, but we basically work since years already in this kind of remote fashion, and most of us also teach at universities, so we know what it means to kind of motivate students and ourselves. And I think our colleagues can kind of comment, but one mode that we like to employ is intensity. Or so you kind of, when you have a project or a deadline, basically you need to build up certain intensity. This is of course a bit harder now to do also remotely, but we would have 24-hour workshops where we would basically kind of brainstorm and work even in a remote manner, collect, and then sort of discuss. Building up this intensity is very important. Again, same thing at the university, when the semester is very long and you have to kind of do this sort of intensive periods, and then there's a downtime, and then again intensive, and then downtime, and so on. I think we actually work in a bit similar way. And then there are some projects that of course require constant effort, like the ones that are being built, like Avala, for example. But many of the other projects, Swiss Art Awards was built in a way, I forgot how long it took, but it was sort of like 2 weeks, very intensive, you know, everybody at the same place. And this was the only way that a project like that could be done, because it required physical presence and a lot of work. Yeah, it's just one comment.
So I guess what Luca is saying, there's not a formula. Every project starts and ends differently and has a different dynamic. But also what these intense, you could say 24-hour things that we inherited actually from our teachers. But these intense gatherings or moments when we craft an idea, when it's clear, when the outline of an idea is clear, then the whole process of working that out is also, can be very silent, can be also faxing each other almost, and annotating things, because if we remove, we have to rely on that, you know, because if we remove ourselves and other ones can understand that, then it's good. Then it will end up being built like that or done like that.
There is a question in the chat, which I will read out to you. Thank you for that great talk. What would you say, who or what you are building for? Is the overall goal of your practice to change things on local personal scale, let's say for one single person, or are you consciously trying to contribute to the wider field of our profession? I'm also copying the question into our Zoom chat, so if you want to reread it.
Maybe I can just respond briefly. I think the work we do is there's a lot of research involved with that, and we have various ways of collecting knowledge which already exists in architecture and our profession. And I think the responses which you see in the work is adding to that dialogue in any way. There are some challenges which are subjectively more important than others, but they all have a similar approach, and that is that there is a challenge, and from that challenge, we try and come together and draw on our different expertise and try and add that to a conversation which could lead on to either a better knowledge for the profession as such, or for example, in some of the other projects dealing with housing or issues of public matter, then sharing that knowledge broadly. I think Claire said it very nicely at the start, and I think you see that in a lot of the work. We're interested in creating public knowledge, and that was this whole contradiction which started TEN to say, well, there is this incredible amount of energy and work and ideas which are kept very close, and they're either monetized very quickly or they're part of an institution. And the idea of TEN was to say, let's break it open and let's make sure we can actually share these ideas. And if we're quick and we get our ideas out there, we have no problem with sharing all of these things. And I think that's knowledge which we're giving out, and it comes back in other ways.
I would also add, majority of the projects we even showed today are, you could say, self-initiated. Even Pavlova House, although it sounds like it's not, it's also kind of half self-initiated project where since the start, we've relied on actually changing that role. And we've sort of went out and acted in the city, distributed cooperative, self-initiated, public stage in Skopje, self-initiated. And all of these kind of projects are actually not dependent on a single person. And also, once you remove any of us from that design process, it still goes on. And that's also exciting. Of course, to do that, we have to tackle a lot of things we got in education, architectural education, or this kind of traditional way of looking at things. And that's also a part of our mission, to kind of try to kind of understand our role more as initiators than as receivers.
Yeah, I was also wondering that what you mentioned exactly, where do all these projects come from? And you mentioned it, that there is a lot of self-initiation or self-initiative in what you do. And I think that also reflects like the personal involvement that you can feel in the projects, that it's really something that you really like. There is an urge to do the things, and it's probably different if you respond to an open call. Obviously, you also get very much involved, but I think this notion, you can feel this. It's interesting that you mentioned this. And I was just one question. I think it was not shown, that project also, this public project, the Nautilus. Can you say some words about this? Because we used it as an image, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. So I'm curious if you could say some words about that.
Maybe Nico and Lucas can start with the drive.
Yeah, I started and then Lucas continues. This was a project, was a big collaboration, and if you look at the credits who was involved, this is literally one A4 sheet. Between people affiliated with ETH and forming out of that 10, and the University of Skopje, and it dealt with a bit a left alone site close to the river, which was a bit cut off, and there we initiated through a structure that connected different levels and also had the function of being part of a scenography. We initiated a happening, maybe also a discourse about public space, and we all went there and produced it.
Yes, I think the process again was, I think it is sort of the founding project of 10, and it had a lot to do with the process that was maybe more important than the project itself in the end, the dialogue and actually the way of self-organization, because we didn't go with a finished project in our pockets. It was actually, we prepared the least to start. We had 3 weeks officially. We had to stretch it for a couple of days, but as Luca said, it was from the beginning this intensity that started, and also this kind of ways how humans and groups to a certain size can self-organize themselves. That was extremely fascinating, and we came along, numerous problems from heat wave with over 40 degrees in the shadow, and
taking
basically it kind of forced us into working at night, or well, we were saved by a big hall that everyone could kind of prefab certain parts in the shade. But to kind of going to every metal workshop of the city to find out how we can actually build this thing and produce it. And there was so much improvisation and self-organizing involved. It was highly fascinating, and also the different peoples that came together. Like half of the students were Swiss, half of them from there. It was a fascinating process, I would say. And yes, we cleaned up the river side and connected the different parts of the riverbed and the upper road, and created also a visible structure to
and what stuck most to me is this is highly inefficient, but this is also what it is about. You have to endure this in order to get through to something more collective, and this was a lesson that was learned over these weeks, to believe in that process and to keep the patience to not follow dynamics that would channel decisions, but to insist on keeping voices within the discourse very dispersed and very low level.
I like this comment on maybe how the collective, the price of the collective is a certain inefficiency, but it's like a notion that needs to be digested, and then you calculate it as a factor if you want this real collective work. Yeah, it's interesting. There's one more question, which I also copied to you in the chat, and I read it out. Thank you for the presentation. It really gave an insight on your work and visions. All of the projects are inspiring and have a story to tell. I can't hold myself and ask about the project in Skopje. And also, are you open for student internships to give a chance for students to be part of your practice? You see how inspiring you are and attractive for the students.
We're all still students. So, so in a way, I think we're open for people to approach us and suggest and tell us what they would like to do. And also just if they see something we do, that they share that passion. Of course, we're welcoming everyone to the table to discuss this. Of course, if chances are there. The thing, just to kind of add to the Skopje, it was really 5-6 years ago. What was really striking is that after we have done that, we were not sure what we have done, and we still wonder what we have done. But what we knew was certain stories from the site. We knew that the city took over our cleaning session on the river. and started maintaining the site for a while, which is supercharged central Skopje site. And you know maybe the recent history of Skopje, and also it's a kind of very political space. And that was kind of really, we had nothing to do with it, but it's someone took over that site. But on the other hand, we've also seen, maybe that best explains a little bit what we also try to achieve. And we've also seen a little kid with the grandfather approaching the structure as we finished it and sort of asking, what is it? And sort of, you know, the grandfather saying, well, let's go discover it. We don't know. And sort of they stayed there and played with it. And that was something that we really took as a chance to kind of understand actually where that collective conversation and that sharp design, as you've seen, that we are committed to, can do.
Two more questions. One is by Fuju. Thank you for the great talk. What kind of clients do you work with and for? And how do you communicate your ideas with them?
Well, there is a variety of clients, but maybe like we could share the experience of working with a little more of working with Zaki, where actually we met Zaki on a totally different construction site, and we did a gallery in Belgrade in the industrial city ports of Belgrade, and this was old storage that we turned into a gallery. And Zaki was Zaki was actually the developer of the interior of our project, and he works with a lot of architects, but he liked us during the process, and he called us to do his house, and to communicate the ideas with him. We, for example, for the Pavlova House, it was really important to be sure that he will understand the project, because it's not easy to understand the idea that we had. So we actually made a really big model of the house. It filled the whole room. It was 1.5 meters by 2.5 meters, and we called him. And he saw it, and it was as we explained it, right away we kind of knew that we were going to do this.
Yeah, I would like to add, speaking of the model, I think this was sort of, communicating the ideas, but also in a way building trust with him and showing him that if something, like once you've built it, he is more sure that he can do it in a way. Because actually when we started communicating, he said no concrete please, and then we ended up with building the most beautiful pieces of concrete, basically. So it wasn't a process that people usually imagine when talking about clients, where this client is this evil person that comes and tells you what to do, but you kind of negotiate all along the way, and then you build this sort of a relationship that also allows them and you both to get the best out of it. So
there is one question, quite a big question, also thanking you for the interesting talk, and the person asks you, what would you say will be the architect's role and place in the coming years?
Well, to link that question maybe to Jana's comment, is like client becomes one of 10. So they join us when they do something with us. So that's a must. And they love it. And then second thing is that this role of an architect is central to also the research we do. And also some slides we have shown, and historically we really question that a lot. Education teaches us one form and one model. Forget about service. Our message is forget about being service providers, forget about waiting for things. Go out there and find and make realities. You have to be extremely engaged, I think, in all the processes, ecological and political, currently in the world. On the other hand, if you don't have that outline, the masterful design that really guides it, and you're passionate about it, it's going to be very hard to communicate things. We really believe that is like you would say an expertise. Well, it's not an expertise, but we really believe that that's still our tool. But our field is way larger than just doing some drawings. So I think we also are on a quest to find that out, but we definitely want to challenge the kind of the normative model. I don't know if that helps, but it definitely sends, I guess, a tone.
I would also like to,
sorry, Luca, you go first.
I would like to just add here to Nemanja's remark. I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I always also tell my students that, 100 years ago, maybe a bit more, modernist movement had an agenda, or the agenda was technology, progress, equality, living standard. Also, we want to live in healthy spaces. We don't want to have multiple generations in the same house. Maybe we want to, we want to benefit from basically the technological development and peace in the world and so on. That was 100 years ago, and I think these ideas are still kind of permeate our profession. I think many architects today still, and students, that think that's their role. That's their role to kind of sort of provide, in a way, as Nemanja said, to be service providers for, kind of increasing the living standard around the world. But for me, or I think for us also, that's a very dangerous way to think, because of course now 100 years later, what is the most pressing problem, or what is the most kind of the biggest challenge that humanity faces? Survival of our race, or the destruction of the planet. So progress means, in a way, potentially destroying ourselves. And basically our role is that we find ourselves basically at the beginning. The recognition is here. We have to save the world. We are part of that process. And the sooner we realize this, the better. Otherwise, we might kind of become irrelevant. I for sure see a future where in 50 years architects are irrelevant. And we have to basically prevent that. So for our sakes, but also for our kind of planet's sake, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I think we have a big kind of role to fill, and the problems are very complex, and we cannot do it on our own. And we have to kind of, educate and think and connect and act in a way really fast. We are really in a kind of urgent times, I would say.
And maybe there I can add on, as you said, I think in university and also the general role of the architect, or the role it used to be before it became a specialized profession, as you said, Claire, was that of the generalist. And we see a lack of generalists to face these problems. And I think that could be that maybe we have to even go way further outside of our field to connect the threads and negotiate, because that's what we are trained for. And I think our problems are so complex and so diverse. It will need a lot of patience and also this kind of dialogues we actually train in our collective.
There is one more question, maybe just as a closure to this. I will read it out. Everybody thinks that this talk is extremely interesting, and also this person joins in and is asking, how important is theoretical study in your practice, and do you think it is possible to experimenting and going to the core of architecture when you are not already connected with an academic environment, and you stand in the pressure of money, legislation, etc.? And then second part of the question, what is something common between all of you?
Can I just jump in quickly on the first one? I think that you don't have to be at all connected to an academic environment to do work, which is, you're talking theoretical study of practice, to do the experimentation and reach a level of finalization in your work. I think you have to have a very keen awareness of how you approach your work and be able to reflect on your work in a critical and structured way. And that's basically research. You can definitely do research outside of academic settings. And I think you'll find actually in architectural research, there's very little architect research institutions who are actually doing that in design. So I think it's something which has to be developed, and I think if you're developing that yourself and you have a way of doing that, you will get to that the quality in the work which you're expecting through that way.
Maybe something common, because it's quite an intimate question.
We work very hard.
I mean, besides that, of course, it's one thing I think also defines us all is that we're all nomads. All of us left our places of origins. All of us left our certain comfort zones, and that those histories brought together really define the conversations, and that's also exciting. There's a certain kind of lightness with that, and that's why we're also able to work through multiple geographies, to be at multiple geographies at the same time, and that's something that we find we actually see kind of so we celebrate that, we see the potential behind that.
Well, thank you. Maybe we'll end with this word, the potential. Thank you so much for this very generous presentation and also interacting so much with our audience. I would also like to thank all the listeners and for everyone who joined in and took the chance to discuss with 10. I just make a little look out to our next architecture talk. It will be on the 3rd of June. We will see in which format it will take place. It's Jasper Schmidlin and Lukas Förmin who will present their projects, their common projects. And all my very, very big thanks again to 10, to everybody who joined in and listened to this, and take care, everybody. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.